Thanks so much for joining us. We are joined, as always, by Greg Engert, beer director for the Neighborhood Restaurant Group, which includes such places as Church Key, where we normally are, and Birch and Barley in the district. This time out, we are at the number 9 Lounge upstairs at Evening Star Cafe in Delray. Very cool place. A little warm on these hot summer days, but we're powering through with a little help here. This looks good and large. What's on tap this week?
So we've been doing DC-based beers for the last 3 weeks because, of course, we had DC Beer Week in August and making it DC Beer Month. But this one is a way to remind everybody that local and DC is really more than just the district limits itself because, of course, we have the Beltway and we have Northern Virginia, we have Southern Maryland. So this is from a craft brewing legend at this point in this area, Bill Madden, and his wonderful brew pub, Mad Fox. Out in Falls Church, Virginia. They make fantastic beers. And one of the reasons I wanted to showcase what they do is because they make amazing stuff. If you go out to their place, you'll have a great time. You'll taste lots of great beers on tap, super fresh that Bill's making all the time, making lots of different things all the time. Classic recipes he's been working on for a long, long time. And also lots of cask ale. He's a huge cask ale proponent. They do cask ale right out there. So really a fantastic place, and they're going through, I think, 25 casks a week at this point, which is, on par with some English pubs in England. So really phenomenal stuff. And another great thing and great news is that they're about to begin very limited distribution of their draft and cask product at a very limited amount of bars and restaurants in the district, of which Church Key and Birch and Barley will always be one. So we'll always have something from Mad Fox on draft. So even if you can't make it all the way out to Mad Fox, you'll be able to see their stuff from time to time in the district. And then for today, I couldn't think of anything more seasonally appropriate than this beautiful Kolsch that Mad Fox makes, and it is fantastic. Actually, this is the filtered version. As you can see, it's crisp and clean. It's been filtered out. They make an unfiltered version of this, which is much hazier, a little bit more mouthfeel and body. And that version actually won a gold medal at the Great American Beer Festival in 2011. So this is the filtered version of it. Beautiful for the hot summer days that we're experiencing and probably will still through September. And it's just a phenomenal beer. So Kolsch, what's Kolsch? Kolsch is a style that actually originated in the 19th century. I've talked before about the availability of pale malt grain that when you heat it up during the malting process, you do so in a way to allow it to maintain its paler color. The Brits really got us started with that in the 17th century, and eventually it spread its way throughout continental Europe, of course, influencing the birth of Pilsner and Helles or pale lagers, among many more things. But this also influenced the beginning of a new style in the Rhine region, the Rhine River region, where we find Dusseldorf, but also Cologne. And Cologne is where Kolsch is from where Kolsch hails. So in Dusseldorf, they make a beer called Altbier, which is very similar to Kolsch, but is brown and darker in color. So we kind of talk about Kolsch as a more modern example of the Rhine River ales. And though it looks like a lager, it's actually an ale. So this beer is fermented with an ale yeast, whereas and we call this ale yeast top fermenting yeast. They tend to flocculate towards the top. Lagers, on the other hand, tend to be brewed with bottom fermenting yeast, lager yeast. They work better at colder temps, ale yeast at warmer temps. Ale yeast tend to give you the big, bold, fruity and spicy flavors we associate with Belgian beers. Lager yeast tend to give you cleaner, crisper, more restrained flavors that we associate with Pilsners and things like that. This is sort of a hybrid, because even though it's an ale yeast, the climate of Cologne is always very temperate, much as Belgium is, or England, or the British Isles. So this is actually fermented with an ale yeast, but at warmer temps than you'd expect, around 60 degrees. And at this temperature, you're going to get a little bit of fruit and spice in the nose, but not as much as you would if you kicked it up to 70, 75 degrees or so. And so you get a kind of a little bit of a fruit and spice quality there, but not so much. They use pale malts like a Pilsner would or a pale lager. And then after fermentation, it's actually lagered. Remember, lagern means to store. It's conditioned, allowing the beer to mellow out and get a crispness and a kind of restraint of flavor that we'd associate with a lager. So it's kind of like a lager with a little bit more sweetness and fruit and spice qualities in the nose, or a more crisp, refreshing form of ale. and really great.
Okay. I have not been here. I've been meaning to go to Mad Fox because I have a colleague who raves about it.
It's outstanding. Even this has more of a spicy quality in the nose than you'd expect from Kolsch's. I mean, a lot of Kolsch's are much crisper, not as fruity or spicy in the nose. So this is a really cool kind of spice note.
That's dynamite.
And then also you get a great, just great kind of almost grainy, almost crackery note in the aroma as well from the malts employed. And I should mention they use about 20% of the malt bill here. The grist is wheat malt, which is great for head retention. Wheat will keep foam a lot better, keep the effervescence in, but also lifts it up and gives it a little bit more of a refreshing quality.
It's hard to. I mean, we've spent the past few weeks talking about local breweries. With how long has Mad Fox been around?
A couple of years, 2.5 years maybe.
And then we talked about DC Brow, 3 stars, and we also talked about
Chop House, which has been around long. And that's the cool thing. There's kind of 2 phases. For the longest time, local beer in DC and even in Northern Virginia was many kind of national chains like Gordon Biersch had a presence making great beers. We had a local chain with a couple locations of Capital City Brewing Company. You get the Rock Bottom stuff. You have Sweetwater, which is part of the Great American Restaurant Group out in Northern Virginia as well. It was kind of with Mad Fox really was like this independent brew pub, and then we have DC Brow, first production brewery in DC, then Chocolate City, and now 3 stars, and then Blue Jacket's up next. So
and Blue Jacket, of course, and 10 years ago, I don't know if we could have guessed how many great new craft breweries would be here. So looking forward, I mean, there's room for more?
I think so. Yeah, as long as it's the product is delicious, as long as you can taste the passion that should be informing the product. It's flavor driven. It's done for the right reasons, and that's just to make something great, to provide great experiences. One of the things that happened in the late '90s, as the first boom of craft brewing happened, was a lot of people tried to appropriate a trend and make some money off of it, and consumers were savvy back then. They're even more savvy now, and you can tell when a beer is being brewed for the wrong reasons. I think you can taste the difference when it's kind of marketing driven rather than flavor driven, or and things like that. So I think that's one thing we have to be careful of. The other thing we have to be careful of is local for local sake, because I love these local breweries. They're coming out with fantastic local beer, and especially in the case of something like a Kolsch or a Pilsner, an IPA, a pale ale, hoppy beers, fresh beers, crisp beers. They all need to be consumed as fresh as possible. And even better when on draft. That's great for local across the board, but I'm hesitant to say just drink local all the time, because there's a lot of great local breweries in other parts of the country that deserve to be tasted, and you also don't want to just drink local just because it's local. And that's what I kind of see might be the next thing. Is there's room for a ton more local breweries in this area, but I just hope it's not done where the local breweries start and they just get away with just being local as the calling card. I say we need to be local, but we also need to be great.
You got to look for guys who are dedicated to it, and the people we've talked about the past few weeks clearly are, as far as I can tell.
Amazing.
What would you pair this with?
Oh man, I think this goes with anything. What's so cool with this is that it's dry without being bitter. It's got some great sweet malt characteristics at the front, and it has that like seasoning quality. It's got this like bright floral spice, almost like cooking spice note in the nose, which is just phenomenal. I mean, I think this can go from the lightest to even a little bit more intense. I see this with crab legs. I see this with just a fresh garden salad, any kind of sandwich that you're having. I think actually it'd be a great like pizza beer. Tomato sauces are tough because they've got acid and sweetness and a lot of flavor. You never want to bring too much bitterness to that, and I can see like this going in nicely with the sweetness of the sauce, but also adding its own kind of spice to join in with the oregano and the garlic and things like that. Red sauce beer.
I'm taking this out to the hammock with me.
Yes.
And quickly, we have a question from Tom Lefebvre, who is from the D.C. area but lives in Munich now. And he wanted to know, he had a question about the Reinheitsgebot, the German purity law.
Sure.
What additional ingredients are added to craft breweries? Not there, and does that disqualify them as being compliant with the German purity law?
It would in many cases. Not this one, for instance, but it doesn't really matter as much. You got to remember, Reinheitsgebot is from the early 16th century, and what's funny is we've concentrated on it for many years, but this is one of hundreds of restrictions placed upon brewers throughout continental Europe, and they were doing this for very, very important reasons back then. And it wasn't just, so the Reinheitsgebot is saying, this is what you can brew with. 3 ingredients, barley malt, hops, and water. They didn't really understand what yeast was back then, of course, so that had to be added later, that you could brew with yeast as well. But the other ordinances that were issued, very similarly to Reinheitsgebot, were restricting when you could brew, because without refrigeration, brewing in the summer, you get lots of infection because it was so hot. Bacteria would go crazy in your beer. So all this was done by the noblemen who were trying to make sure that the beer industry continued to thrive. A number of reasons. To make the beer taste better, of course, so that they could tax it and make money, or brew it and sell it and make money, and also to make sure that the people that were supposed to be working for them and paying them taxes and things like that could continue to do that with some health, and needed that hydrating factor, which of course is beer and always was. So these were means by which they were just trying to make beer not taste terrible. Today we have so many advancements, of course, that happened in the 19th century: stainless steel, hydrometers, thermometers, refrigeration, pasteurization. We have a lot more grip on what we brew with and how we brew. We can make things taste great without those measures. So we're saying, okay, we don't need to abide by that anymore, because now we can add different things. Now, that's not to say that it's not great. Lots of beers that do comply with Reinheitsgebot, which probably most still do, are phenomenal. But if you want to start throwing in your coffee, your chocolate, your fruits, your spices, all these additional crazy things that craft brewers have embraced so wholeheartedly, which is a great thing for innovation and for experimentation, those wouldn't technically be allowed. And actually, a lot of people would claim that the Reinheitsgebot, and even if not the legal attending to it in Germany, but just kind of the cultural attendance to Reinheitsgebot and feeling that they need to keep following that law, has in some ways slowed their innovative progress compared to, say, America or even other places. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I think in the next few weeks, as summer rolls down, maybe we can talk about growlers, mainly where to fill them in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, because it's different, as you might imagine, across the jurisdictions. If you have a question for Greg, you can email us, please do, at beeroftheweek@wtop.com. Greg, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Everyone, please always do drink responsibly, and be sure to bring your thirst next time for another Beer of the Week.